The sun hung low over the cracked asphalt of Willow Creek High School's parking lot, casting long shadows that stretched like forgotten regrets across the empty spaces. Olivia Harper stood alone on the edge of the football field, her cap and gown feeling heavier than the capstone of her dreams. It was graduation day, the moment she'd clawed her way toward through late nights, studying under the flicker of a single bulb in her cramped trailer. The scent of stale coffee and determination thick in the air. Her family, Mom, Dad, her little brother Tommy, had promised they'd be there, front row, cheering louder than anyone, but the seats remained empty. A glaring void amid the sea of proud parents snapping photos and grandparents dabbing at tears. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Where's her people?" Olivia's cheeks burned as Principal Hargrove cleared his throat on the makeshift stage, calling her name into the microphone. She walked the few steps to receive her diploma, the paper crinkling in her trembling hands. But the applause was polite, sparse, like pity dressed as congratulations. In that instant, the weight of abandonment crashed down, sharper than any rejection she'd ever known. How could they forget? After all the sacrifices, the endless shifts at the diner to keep the lights on, the quiet vows whispered in the dark that she'd make it for them all. As Olivia descended the steps, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a low rumble pierced the afternoon haze. It started distant, like thunder rolling in from the desert horizon, but grew into a symphony of raw power. Engines snarling, exhaust pipes coughing plumes of dust-choked smoke. Heads turned, murmurs turning to gasps as a convoy crested the hill, 75 motorcycles thundering into view. They weren't the sleek touring bikes of weekend warriors. These were battle-scarred Harleys, choppers with custom flames licking the tanks, riders clad in weathered leather vests emblazoned with the faded emblem of the Iron Vow, a coiled serpent around a broken chain, symbolizing bonds forged in fire and unbreakable by time. The pack rolled in formation, a rolling wall of chrome and grit, parting the crowd like Moses at the sea. Olivia froze, her heart pounding in sync with the revving throttles, the acrid tang of hot metal and gasoline filling her nostrils. Leading the charge was Ethan Forge Malone, a man whose face bore the map of old wars, scarred jawline from a roadside bomb in forgotten sands, eyes like polished obsidian that had seen too many dawns without sleep. At 45, Ethan rode not for the thrill, but for the ghosts he carried. 20 years ago, in the dim glow of a VA hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and despair, he'd made a promise to a wide-eyed nurse named Clara Harper. She was Olivia's aunt, the sister Mom never talked about, the one who'd patched Ethan's wounds after his last tour and shared stories of her niece, the girl with fire in her veins, destined for more than the Dust Bowl life. "If anything happens to me," Clara had whispered, her hand frail in his calloused one, "watch over Livy. She's got a light that needs guarding." Ethan had nodded, the weight of it sealing like solder on his soul. Clara passed that winter, a quiet fade from illness, and Ethan buried the vow deep, lost in the roar of the road and the brotherhood of the Iron Vow. But fate has a way of revving back to life. A chance encounter at a roadside stop last month, a faded photo in a wallet, Olivia's school colors pinned to a locket, had unearthed the memory. He'd called in the crew, every rider who'd ever owed him a debt, because promises weren't just words. They were the chains that held a man upright. The bikers killed their engines in a cascading silence, boots hitting pavement like drumbeats. They dismounted as one, a sea of denim and ink, helmets tucked under arms, revealing faces etched with loyalty's quiet fury. Ethan strode forward, his boots crunching gravel, and climbed the stage without a word to the stunned principal. He took the microphone, his voice gravel rough from years of wind and smoke, but steady as bedrock. "Olivia Harper," he boomed, the name echoing across the field. "This one's for you." The crowd held its breath as the bikers erupted, 75 voices roaring her name in unison, fists pumping the air, vests slapping against chests. Livy, Livy, Livy! It wasn't chaos. It was thunder, a wall of sound that drowned out the emptiness, filling the voids her family had left. Olivia's eyes widened, tears blurring the sight of these strangers, tattooed giants with gentle smiles, grandmothers on the backs of bikes waving homemade signs. "Proud of you, kid." One rider, a burly woman named Grace with silver streaks in her braid, tossed a bouquet of wild desert flowers onto the stage, petals scattering like confetti in the breeze. In that moment, as the cheers swelled and cameras flashed like distant stars, Olivia felt the shift, a crack in the armor of her isolation. Ethan met her gaze from the stage, nodding once, the promise in his eyes unspoken but ironclad. This wasn't just a rescue. It was the spark of something larger, a family forged not by blood, but by the rumble of engines and the honor of words kept. But as the convoy prepared to ride out, Ethan knew the road ahead wouldn't be smooth. Whispers among the riders hinted at shadows in Olivia's life, rumors of a family tangled in debts and bad choices, the kind that drew darker forces. He'd pulled the crew together for her aunt's sake, but now, with the sun dipping toward the horizon and the air cooling with the promise of night, Ethan wondered if this forgotten vow would demand more than cheers. It would demand everything. The field buzzed with newfound energy, families mingling awkwardly with the bikers, sharing handshakes and stories over lukewarm punch. Olivia clutched her diploma, the paper now feeling like a talisman, as Ethan approached. "Your aunt, she believed in you," he said softly, his voice cutting through the din like a knife through fog. "Said you'd light up the world. We came to make sure no one dims that." Olivia swallowed hard, the metallic taste of emotion on her tongue. "You don't even know me," she whispered. Ethan's smile was wry, lines deepening around his mouth. "Sometimes, kid, that's all it takes, a word given long ago." As the first stars pricked the twilight sky, the engines fired up again, a low growl building. Olivia watched them go, the convoy snaking back toward the open road, taillights winking like fireflies. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The roar had awakened something in her, a call to ride her own path, with guardians she'd never expected. Yet, as the dust settled and the crowd dispersed, a shadow lingered at the edge of the lot. A sleek black sedan idled, its tinted windows hiding watchful eyes. The family that had forgotten her graduation hadn't vanished entirely. Their neglect was just the surface of deeper troubles brewing. Ethan glanced back from his bike, sensing the unease in the air, the faint scent of trouble, like ozone before a storm. The iron vow had answered one call, but others echoed on the wind. Promises that would test loyalty, unearth buried secrets, and forge a chosen family from the ashes of betrayal. Olivia turned toward home, the cheers still ringing in her ears, unaware that the engines she'd heard were the first rumble of a reckoning. The twilight deepened into a bruised purple over Willow Creek as Olivia pedaled her battered bike down the dusty back roads, the cheers of the bikers still echoing in her skull like a half-remembered dream. The air carried the faint, lingering bite of exhaust and wildflowers, a strange cocktail that made her chest ache with something between gratitude and confusion. Her cap and gown were stuffed into her backpack, the diploma crinkling against her spine, a fragile shield against the knot of betrayal tightening in her gut. Home wasn't far, a sagging, mobile home on the outskirts, where the porch light flickered like a hesitant heartbeat and the chain-link fence rattled in the evening breeze. But tonight, the familiar route felt longer, shadowed by the weight of empty seats and unanswered questions. Why hadn't they come? Mom's endless shifts at the factory, Dad's late nights at the bar, excuses she'd heard 1,000 times, but this was her day, The one she'd fought for, scraping by on scholarships and sheer will. The roar of those engines had filled the void, but it couldn't erase the sting. She coasted to a stop at the gravel driveway, kicking up pebbles that skittered like fleeing thoughts. The black sedan was gone from the school lot, but its presence lingered in her mind, a sleek intruder amid the rusted pickups of the neighborhood. Shoving open the creaky gate, Olivia called out softly, "Mom! Tommy!" No answer, just the hum of crickets and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. Inside, the trailer smelled of microwave dinners and unwashed laundry, the kind of staleness that clung to dreams deferred. The living room was dim, lit only by the blue glow of the television, murmuring some forgotten game show. Mum, Sarah Harper, slumped on the couch, nursing a lukewarm beer, her eyes red-rimmed and distant. Dad was nowhere in sight, probably nursing his own regrets at the corner tavern. Little Tommy, all of 8 years old, peeked from behind the kitchen door, his face smudged with what looked like chocolate, but his eyes held a wariness too old for his age. "Livy, that you?" Sarah's voice was thick, slurred at the edges. She sat up, blinking as if emerging from a fog. "Heard something about graduation on the radio. Traffic was bad, honey. We tried." Olivia's jaw tightened, the words landing like dull thuds. "Tried." The empty seats mocked the lie, but she swallowed the retort, dropping her backpack by the door. "It was fine, Mom. Really." Tommy shuffled forward, clutching a crumpled drawing, stick figures under a sun that looked more like a lopsided smile. "I made this for you," he mumbled, thrusting it into her hands. It was her, in a cap, surrounded by hearts. The gesture cracked something in her, a quiet sob escaping before she could cage it. She pulled him into a hug, his small frame trembling against her, the scent of peanut butter and innocence grounding her. But even as she held him, Olivia sensed the undercurrent, the unpaid bills stacked on the counter like accusations, the hushed phone calls Dad made in the garage about one more favor from old associates, debts that whispered of bad choices, the kind that pulled families under like quicksand. Across town, in the dim haze of the Iron Vows clubhouse, a weathered barn on the edge of the desert, ringed by saguaros standing sentinel, Ethan Malone nursed a black coffee at a scarred wooden table. The air was thick with the aroma of engine oil and fresh brewed grounds, the low murmur of his crew settling into the night like a well-oiled machine. 75 riders, from grizzled veterans like Marcus Iron Reyes, whose hands bore the calluses of rebuilding lives after the war, to younger prospects like Jake Harlan, fresh-faced but fierce in his loyalty. They'd rolled in from scattered outposts, answering Ethan's call without question, because in their world, a vow was the only currency that mattered. Ethan stared at the faded photo on the table. Clara Harper smiling in her nurse's scrubs, Olivia as a toddler perched on her knee. The image had surfaced like a ghost during that roadside stop, tucked in a locket Olivia's mom had dropped at a gas station. Clara's words replayed in his mind, soft as desert wind. "Watch over Livy. She's got a light that needs guarding." He'd failed her once, burying the promise under miles of blacktop and the numb haze of survival. No more. Grace Storm Whitaker, the burly woman with the silver-streaked braid who'd tossed the flowers, slid into the seat across from him. Her vest was patched with badges from rides across state lines, each one a story of redemption snatched from the jaws of chaos. "That kid's got fire, Forge," she said, her voice a low rumble, eyes sharp under the brim of her cap. "But I saw that sedan tailing us out, not locals. Smells like trouble, the kind with badges or worse." Ethan nodded, the scar on his jaw pulling tight. He'd spotted it too, the tinted windows hiding faces that didn't belong in Willow Creek's dusty corners. Rumors had trickled in during the ride. The Harpers tangled in a web of loans from shady lenders, the sort who enforced with threats instead of contracts. Olivia's dad, once a mechanic with steady hands, had fallen into the bottle after a mill closure, borrowing from ghosts who never forgot. And now, with Olivia stepping into her future, they might see her as leverage, a bright spot to dim for leverage. Ethan's fist clenched around his mug, the ceramic warm against his knuckles. The iron vow wasn't just a club, it was a pact, forged in the fires of lost battles and kept through quiet acts of honor. They'd cheered for her today, but tomorrow? It might mean riding into the storm. Back at the trailer, Olivia tucked Tommy into bed, the sheets threadbare but clean, his breathing evening out into the soft rhythm of sleep. Sarah hovered in the doorway, wringing her hands. "We should have been there, Liv. They're tight right now. Your dad, he—" A knock at the door cut her off, sharp and insistent. Olivia's heart skipped, the earlier roar of engines flashing in her mind. She peered through the peephole, a stranger in a rumpled suit. Badge glinting under the porch light, his face all angles and impatience. "Mrs. Harper, we need to talk about the payments." Sarah paled, waving Olivia back. "Go to your room, honey. It's nothing." But Olivia lingered, ear pressed to the thin wall, catching fragments. Overdue, consequences, the girl. The words coiled like smoke, hinting at shadows closing in. As the man left, his footsteps fading into the night, Olivia slipped outside, the cool air raising goosebumps on her arms. She pulled out her phone, the screen illuminating her face in the dark, a number Ethan had pressed into her hand during the chaos at the field, in case the road gets rough. She hesitated, thumb hovering, the desert wind whispering through the mesquite trees. Dialing felt like crossing a threshold, from solitary struggle to something shared, unbreakable. Miles away, Ethan's phone buzzed on the table, Clara's locket catching the lamplight. He answered on the first ring, his voice steady as the horizon. "Livy, talk to me." In that exchange, fragile as a spark in the dusk, the threads of old promises began to weave tighter, pulling a chosen family from the edges of abandonment. But outside, the night held its breath, the distant hum of an engine, not the vow's thunder but something colder, more calculated, signaling that the cheers were just the opening act. The reckoning revved closer, demanding loyalties tested in the fire of truth. Olivia's thumb trembled as she pressed the phone to her ear, the cool metal grounding her against the night's chill. The desert wind tugged at her hair, carrying the faint scent of creosote bushes and distant rain that never seemed to fall. Ethan's voice crackled through the line, warm and unyielding like the rumble of a well-tuned engine. "Livy, you okay?" She leaned against the trailer's peeling siding, glancing back at the door where her mom's silhouette hovered like a ghost in the window. The words spilled out in a rush. The knock, the suited man with his clipped demands, the fragments of consequences that hung in the air like smoke. She didn't mention the fear twisting in her gut, the way it made her graduation diploma feel like a target painted on her back. Ethan listened without interrupting, his silence a steady anchor. "Stay put," he said finally, the gravel in his tone laced with quiet resolve. "We'll handle this. Iron vow doesn't break its word." The call ended with a promise of his own, riders en route by dawn. Olivia slipped back inside, the floorboards creaking under her sneakers, but sleep evaded her, chased away by the what-ifs swirling like dust devils. Across the shadowed expanse of Willow Creek, the Iron Vow clubhouse pulsed with subdued energy under strings of bare bulbs swaying in the breeze. Ethan pocketed his phone, the weight of Clara's locket pulling at his chest like an old wound reopening. The room fell quiet as he stood, his chair scraping against the concrete floor, a sound that cut through the murmurs like a blade. Marcus Iron Reyes, broad-shouldered with a salt-and-pepper beard that spoke of battles long buried, looked up from polishing his bike's handlebars, the cloth whispering over chrome. "Trouble?" he asked, his eyes narrowing, the faint scar across his forehead catching the light, a memento from a convoy ambush years back, when loyalty had meant pulling brothers from the wreckage. Ethan nodded, recounting the call in clipped sentences, the air thickening with the scent of leather and anticipation. "Grace Storm." Whitaker leaned against a support beam, her arms crossed over her vest, the serpent emblem glinting. "Harper's got themselves in deep with the wrong crowd," she muttered, her voice carrying the weight of too many similar tales. "Lenders who don't take no for an answer. Seen it before. Start with the wallet, end with the family." The crew exchanged glances, a silent pact forming in the dim glow. These weren't outlaws chasing glory, they were guardians of forgotten oaths. Men and women who'd traded uniforms for vests, but never shed the code of honor. By first light, the convoy assembled in the club's gravel yard, engines idling like impatient beasts. 75 bikes lined up in precise rows, exhaust fumes curling into the pink-streaked sky, the horizon bleeding gold over the saguaros. Ethan mounted his Harley, the leather seat creaking under him, his gloved hands gripping the bars with the familiarity of an old friend. The riders followed suit, veterans like Samuel Ghost Landry, whose quiet demeanor hid a past as a medic in the sands, patching wounds under fire, and prospects like Tyler Spark Novak, eager eyes burning with the fire of newfound purpose. They weren't rolling into a fight, not yet, but the air hummed with readiness. The collective rever declaration against the shadows encroaching on Olivia's light. Grace rode shotgun beside Ethan, her chopper's sidecar empty, save for a thermos of strong coffee and a map marked with whispers of the lender's haunts, a nondescript warehouse on the town's frayed edge, where deals were struck in back rooms, reeking of stale cigars and desperation. "For Clara," Ethan said over the din, his voice carrying to the pack. A chorus of affirmations rose, fists thumping handlebars, the bond tightening like chains forged in the dawn's forge. The ride into Willow Creek was a procession of controlled thunder, cutting through the morning mist that clung to the lowlands like regret. Olivia heard them before she saw them, the growl building from a distant purr to a full-throated roar that vibrated through the trailer's thin walls. She bolted to the window, heart racing, as the convoy crested the rise, a steel river flowing toward her driveway. Sarah stirred in the kitchen, coffee mug paused mid-sip, her face paling at the sight. Tommy pressed his nose to the glass, eyes wide with wonder. "They're back, for us." Olivia nodded, a tentative smile breaking through as Ethan killed his engine at the gate, boots hitting gravel with purpose. The others fanned out, forming a respectful perimeter, their presence a shield without aggression, leather-clad sentinels under the climbing sun. Ethan approached the porch, removing his helmet to reveal hair tousled by the wind, his expression steady. "Morning, Livy. Told you we'd come." Sarah stepped out, arms wrapped around herself, the lines of exhaustion etched deeper. "Who are you people? What do you want with us?" Her voice wavered, laced with the defensiveness of a life spent dodging blows. Ethan met her gaze, unflinching. "I'm Ethan Malone, your sister Clara. She was family to me once. Saved my life, more ways than one. Made me promise to look out for Olivia." Sarah's eyes flickered with recognition, then pain, a buried sibling rift surfacing like an old scar. "Clara's gone years now. What does that have to do with this?" She gestured vaguely at the bikes, the riders watching with quiet vigilance. Ethan pulled the locket from his pocket, holding it out, the photo of Clara and toddler Olivia catching the light. Sarah's breath hitched, hand reaching instinctively before pulling back. "She'd want this family whole," he said softly. "Heard about the visitors last night. We can help square things, no strings, but hiding won't cut it anymore. Inside, Tommy tugged at Olivia's sleeve, whispering, "They're like superheroes, sis." She squeezed his hand, the warmth chasing away the night's chill, as Grace dismounted and approached with a nod to Sarah. "We've dealt with types like that before. Let's talk inside, away from prying eyes." The group gathered in the cramped living room, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with the intruder's faint leather aroma, an uneasy alliance forming amid the clutter of everyday struggle. Ethan laid out a plan born of experience, a sit-down with the lenders, not with threats but with the weight of the vows network, connections to fairer hands, veterans' aid groups that could refinance without the noose. Sarah hesitated, glancing at Olivia, the weight of years of bad decisions pressing down. "Your dad's in deeper than you know," she admitted, voice breaking. "One slip, and they come for everything." Olivia stepped forward, her graduation gown draped over a chair like a banner of resolve. "Then we don't slip. Not anymore." The words hung in the air, a vow of her own, echoing Clara's light. Outside, the convoy waited, engines silent but ready, as the first threads of trust wove through the room. But as the sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the yard, a low-slung car crept along the distant road, tires humming with intent, unseen eyes tracking the gathering. The promises were mending fractures, but the storm brewed, testing the family's fragile edges. Ethan's hand rested on the locket, sensing the horizon darkening. The ride ahead, demanding more than engines. It demanded souls laid bare in the pursuit of honor. The morning sun filtered through the trailer's thin curtains, casting striped shadows across the cluttered coffee table, where maps and scribbled notes lay like battle plans from a war no one wanted. Olivia sat on the edge of the worn couch, her fingers tracing the frayed seam of the cushion, the faint scent of last night's rain mingling with the bitter edge of fresh brewed coffee that Grace had insisted on making. It was a small act, grounding, like the way the woman's calloused hands moved with quiet efficiency over the stove, reminding Olivia that strength often hid in the ordinary. Sarah paced the narrow space between the kitchenette and the door, her slippers whispering against the linoleum, each step heavy with the ghosts of choices that had led them here. Tommy hovered near Olivia's side, his small hand clutching her knee, eyes darting between the strangers who filled their home with an unfamiliar solidity. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the locket dangling from his fingers like a pendulum marking time's unforgiving tick. "These lenders," Ethan said, his voice low and measured, cutting through the tension like a steady engine hum, "they don't play fair, but neither do we when it comes to family." He spread the map out, a finger tracing a jagged line to the warehouse district on the town's outskirts, shadowy buildings, hunkered like forgotten secrets under the relentless sky. Grace nodded, her silver braid swaying as she pointed to a side road marked in red ink. "We go in numbers, but not loud. Show them the vows reach, connections that can offer real help, not chains." Marcus Iron Reyes stood by the window, his broad frame blocking the light, arms crossed over a chest etched with faded tattoos of serpents and shields. He'd ridden with Ethan since the early days, back when promises were sealed over foxholes and field dressings, and his silence now spoke volumes, approval laced with caution. "Heard whispers," Marcus rumbled, his beard catching the sunlight. "The man's behind it, Victor Kane. Runs a tight operation, squeezes until something breaks. But he's got cracks too, old debts of his own." Sarah stopped pacing, her face paling as the name landed. "Kane? God, no. Your dad. He fixed cars for him years back before the drinking got bad. Thought we were clear." Her voice cracked, hands twisting together, the rings on her fingers glinting like accusations. Olivia felt a surge of protectiveness, reaching out to still her mum's fidgeting. "We're not running any more," she said, the words surprising even herself with their steel. The cheers from yesterday still echoed in her bones, a reminder that abandonment didn't have to define them. Tommy looked up at her, his chocolate-smudged face breaking into a tentative grin. "Like the bikers? We ride with them?" The innocence in his question pierced the room, drawing a soft chuckle from Grace, who knelt to his level, her eyes kind under the lines of hard miles. "Something like that, kid. Sometimes the best rides start right here, at home." Outside, the convoy waited in patient formation, engines off but alive with potential. The chrome accents catching the climbing sun, casting sparks across the gravel like distant stars. Riders milled about, sharing thermoses and quiet words, their vests a tapestry of patches earned through trials. Desert Guardian, Vowkeeper. Samuel Ghost Landry tinkered with a loose chain on his bike, his medic's precision evident in every turn of the wrench, while Tyler Spark Novak scanned the horizon, young vigilance burning bright. They weren't invaders, they were the quiet force that filled voids, the chosen kin that appeared when blood faltered. Ethan glanced out the window, sensing the shift in the air, a subtle thickening like the hush before a sandstorm. The low-slung car from before idled at the road's bend, half hidden by a cluster of mesquite trees, its engine a faint purr that set his instincts prickling. Not locals, that much was clear. The plate was out of state, sleek and anonymous. "We move at noon," Ethan decided, folding the map with deliberate care. "Sit down, not showdown. Offer them a way out. Refinance through legit channels, veterans funds we've got ties to." Clara would have wanted it clean. Sarah met his eyes, the mention of her sister bridging the years of silence between them. "She always saw the good in people, even when I couldn't. Why now, after all this time?" Ethan's scar tightened as he smiled faintly, the weight of old wards pressing. "Because promises don't expire. She pulled me from the dark once. This is me paying it forward." The room settled into a charged calm, plans solidifying like solder on metal. Olivia felt the shift within her, a spark igniting, turning isolation into alliance. She imagined the road ahead, not as escape, but as reckoning, the rumble of engines her new heartbeat. As the clock ticked toward noon, the group stepped out into the yard. The sun now high and unforgiving, baking the earth into a haze of heat waves. The convoy stirred to life, a low growl building as riders mounted up, boots thudding against pegs. Olivia watched from the porch, Tommy waving wildly beside her, Sarah's hand on her shoulder a tentative anchor. Ethan nodded to her once, the locket tucked safely away before swinging onto his Harley. The pack rolled out in a disciplined wave, dust rising in golden plumes, heading toward the warehouse like a steel tide against corruption's shore. But as they crested the first rise, the watching car peeled away from its hiding spot, tires crunching gravel with predatory intent, slipping into their wake unseen. Whispers of deeper entanglements surfaced in Ethan's mind. Kane's ties to shadier networks, the kind that preyed on vulnerabilities like Olivia's bright future. The ride wasn't just about debts. It was about unearthing truths buried under neglect, forging redemption from the grit of loyalty. The warehouse loomed on the horizon, a squat fortress of corrugated metal under the blazing sky, its chain-link perimeter rattling in the wind. Ethan signaled a halt at the approach, the convoy fanning out into a non-threatening arc, engines cutting to silence that amplified the desert's vast hush. Grace dismounted first, her presence a calm bulwark as they walked the final stretch, boots echoing on cracked pavement. Inside, the air hung heavy with the tang of rust and machine oil, shadows pooling in corners where deals festered. Victor Kane waited in a sparse office, a wiry man with slicked hair and eyes like polished flint, flanked by two associates whose bulks strained against ill-fitting suits. "Malone," he drawled, leaning back in his creaky chair, the scent of cheap cologne cutting sharp. "Heard you play hero. This family's tab is mine, blood or not. Ethan stood tall, unflinching, the vow's emblem on his vest a quiet emblem of resolve. We're here to settle fair. Refinance offer, clean slate, no interest traps. Kane's laugh was dry, echoing off the walls, but his gaze flickered to the riders visible through the grimy window, a sea of leather holding the line. Tension coiled, ethical wires humming, push too hard and lines blurred, yield and shadows deepened. Olivia, waiting back at the trailer with Sarah and Tommy, paced the porch, the distant rumble a lifeline pulling her toward hope. But as negotiations stretched, a phone buzzed in Ethan's pocket. Tommy's school, a vague threat laced in the caller's tone. The stakes sharpened, promises tested in the crucible of moral fire, the chosen family bracing for the storm's full fury. If this story is touching your heart, hit that like button to show your support. The warehouse's dim interior pressed in like a held breath, the air thick with the metallic tang of rust and the faint, acrid bite of old grease traps long since drained. Ethan stood at the center of the sparse office, his boots planted firm on the scarred concrete floor, the echo of their entry still lingering like a challenge unanswered. Victor Kane lounged behind a battered desk, piled with ledgers and crumpled receipts, his thin lips curled in a smirk that didn't reach his flinty eyes. The two associates loomed at his flanks, their postures rigid, hands twitching near pockets that bulged with unspoken threats. Outside, through the grimy window streaked with desert dust, the Iron Vow riders held their ground, a silent phalanx of leather and resolve, chrome glinting under the midday sun like blades drawn, but sheathed. Grace Storm Whitaker positioned herself at Ethan's side, her presence a steady counterweight, while Marcus Iron Reyes lingered by the door, his broad frame filling the threshold, eyes scanning every shadow. Kane drummed his fingers on the desk, the rhythm sharp and impatient, nails clicking like distant gunfire. Refinance? That's cute, Malone. But the Harpers owe me. Real money, not your club fairy tales. His voice slithered out, laced with the false camaraderie of a man used to bending others to his will. Ethan didn't flinch, his scarred jaw set like forged steel, the weight of Clara's locket a hidden talisman against his chest. He'd seen worse than this snake in oil-slick suits, ambushes in sun-baked valleys where promises were the only thing keeping a man alive. "We're not here for tales," Ethan replied, his tone even, gravel rough from wind-swept miles. "Veterans fund, I know. Low interest, no traps. Clears your slate. Keeps the family intact. Or we walk. And your operation gets a look from folks who don't like how you collect." The words hung heavy, laced with the quiet authority of a man who'd stared down corruption before, not with fists, but with the unyielding truth of honor. Kane's smirk faltered, his gaze flicking to the window, where Samuel Ghost Landry adjusted his stance, the medic's calm demeanor belying the precision of hands that had saved lives under fire. The associates shifted, one muttering low into a concealed earpiece, the static hiss cutting the tension like a frayed wire. Grace leaned in slightly, her silver braid catching the faint light from a bare bulb overhead, voice steady as bedrock. "We've got eyes on your books, Kane. Sloppy entries. Favors called in from the wrong places. Clean this up now or it unravels." It wasn't a bluff. The Vow's network ran deep, threads woven through old war buddies in law circles and aid groups that championed the overlooked. Kane's face tightened, a vein pulsing at his temple, the scent of his cheap cologne sharpening with his rising ire. He leaned forward, elbows slamming the desk, papers scattering like fallen leaves. "You think a pack of road dogs scares me? The girl's future, college dreams, that shiny diploma, it's leverage. One call, and it all crumbles." The phone in Ethan's pocket buzzed again, insistent, pulling his focus for a split second. He ignored it, but the vibration echoed the unease coiling in his gut. The call from Tommy's school earlier. vague warnings about attendance issues that smelled of planted seeds. Outside, Tyler Spark Novak paced the perimeter, his young eyes sharp on the approaching dust cloud from the low-slung car that had tailed them. It circled once, tires crunching gravel, before peeling away toward the trailer park, a predator slipping its leash. Marcus caught the movement, his hand signaling subtly to the riders, a ripple of readiness passing through the group like wind over parched earth. Back inside, Kane pressed on, his voice rising, words laced with the poison of desperation. Her dad's a deadbeat, Mum's barely holding the line. I own them, every missed payment a chain. Ethan's eyes narrowed. The memory of Clara's frail hand, in his flashing vivid, the nurse who'd mended more than flesh, who'd entrusted him with a light he wouldn't let extinguish. Chains break, he said quietly, the words carrying the weight of battles won through loyalty, not brute force. Ours don't. The negotiation stretched, a tense dance of offers and counters, the office growing warmer as the sun beat down, sweat beading on Kane's brow like reluctant confessions. Grace slid a folder across the desk, documents from the Veterans Fund, stamped and legitimate, a lifeline extended without hooks. Kane scanned them, his associates exchanging uneasy glances, the air humming with the ethical tightrope they all walked. Push too far, and it tipped into chaos. Yield, and shadows retreated, if only for a breath. Finally, Kane exhaled, slumping back, the fight leaching from his posture like air from a punctured tire. Fine. Sign it over. No more visits, no more games. His pen scratched across the page, the sound final, echoing off the walls as hands shook in a truce born of necessity. Ethan nodded once, the relief subtle, a crack in the armor of vigilance. But as they turned to leave, the phone buzzed again. Sarah this time, her voice trembling through the line when he stepped outside into the blinding light. They're here, Ethan. At the trailer, the car, and more. The convoy erupted into motion, engines roaring to life in a symphony of urgency, dust billowing like a veil torn aside. Ethan gunned his Harley, the vibration thrumming through his bones. Grace and Marcus flanking him as the pack surged forward, a steel serpent uncoiling toward Willow Creek. The warehouse receded in the side mirror, Kane's figure a diminishing shadow. But the victory felt hollow, laced with the foreknowledge that debts like these left echoes. Olivia waited at the trailer, Sarah barricading the door with a chair, Tommy's wide eyes peering from a window crack. The low-slung car idled in the driveway, flanked by two more vehicles, figures emerging. Kane's enforcers, faces hardened by the grind of unchecked power. They hadn't come for talk. The buzz of Ethan's earlier phone calls had been diversions, buying time for this escalation. "Get back!" Olivia shouted as the first rider approached the porch, but Sarah held her close, the scent of fear sharp in the cramped space. The iron vow arrived like judgment's thunder, tires screeching to a halt in a wall of chrome and grit, cutting off the intruder's advance. Ethan dismounted in a fluid motion, his voice booming over the din. "Stand down, deal's done." Kane signed it. The lead enforcer, a burly man with a shaved head and tattooed knuckles, sneered, hand dipping toward his belt. "Boss says otherwise, girl's part of the collateral." Tension crackled, the air electric with the standoff's weight, fists clenched but no one drawing first, the moral line held taut. Grace stepped forward, her presence commanding, voice cutting clear. "Walk away. We've got witnesses, records. This ends clean, or it ends with lights flashing." Samuel Ghost moved to the trailer's side, positioning himself between the family and the threat, his medic's calm a shield. Tyler Spark revved his engine, the sound a warning growl, while Marcus loomed large, ready to bridge words and action if needed. The enforcers hesitated, eyes darting to the sea of vests emblazoned with the coiled serpent, the unbreakable chain, a symbol that had faced down worse than hired muscle. One by one, they backed toward their cars, the low-slung vehicle peeling out first, tires spinning gravel into the air like fleeing accusations. The dust settled slowly, the sun dipping toward afternoon's gold, casting long shadows that retreated like defeated foes. Olivia emerged from the trailer, Sarah and Tommy at her heels, the family's faces etched with a mix of awe and exhaustion. Ethan approached, the locket glinting as he handed Sarah a copy of the signed papers. "It's over. Clara's promise. It's kept." She clutched them, tears tracing paths down her cheeks, the rift of years softening in the warmth of unexpected grace. Tommy ran to Grace, hugging her leg, the burly rider ruffling his hair with a gentle laugh. In that moment, amid the cooling engines and the whisper of wind through the mesquite, the chosen family solidified. Not born of blood, but forged in the fire of loyalty's quiet roar. But as the convoy prepared to disperse, Ethan caught a final glimpse of the retreating cars, their taillights fading into the haze. Kane's signature might bind paper, but grudges lingered like exhaust in the air, hinting at deeper roots, connections that twisted through Willow Creek's underbelly, threatening to pull at the threads just mended. Olivia met his gaze, her eyes holding a newfound steel, the graduation cheers evolving into a deeper vow. The road ahead shimmered with promise, but also peril, demanding sacrifices that tested the soul's unyielding honor. The dust from the retreating cars hung in the air like a fading threat, swirling lazily in the late afternoon sun that painted the trailer park in hues of amber and shadow. Olivia stood on the porch, her arms wrapped around Tommy, who clutched the hem of her shirt with sticky fingers, his wide eyes still tracing the path where the enforcers had vanished. The low rumble of the Iron Vow's engines idled softly now, a comforting undercurrent that chased away the sharp tang of fear clinging to the gravel. Sarah leaned against the doorframe, the signed papers crumpled slightly in her fist, her breaths coming in shallow waves as if testing the newfound air of reprieve. Ethan's boots crunched as he approached, the locket swinging gently from his hand like a compass pointing toward closure, its chain catching flecks of light that danced across the weathered siding. "You did good, holding the line," Ethan said to Sarah, his voice a low anchor amid the settling quiet. She met his gaze, the lines around her eyes softening for the first time in what felt like years, the scent of her faded perfume mixing with the earthy bite of the desert wind. Clara. She would have been proud of all of us. The name bridged the chasm of old silences, pulling at threads long frayed by resentment and survival's harsh demands. Sarah nodded, a single tear carving a path through the dust on her cheek, and extended the papers toward him, a gesture of trust handed over like a fragile vow renewed. Grace dismounted nearby, her chopper's kickstand sinking into the soft earth, and knelt to Tommy's level, offering a small patch from her vest, a coiled serpent embroidered in silver thread. "For the little guardian," she murmured, her silver-streaked braid falling forward like a banner of quiet strength. Tommy's face lit up, pinning it to his shirt with clumsy fingers, the emblem a talisman against the shadows that had loomed so close. Inside the trailer, the group gathered once more, the cramped space now feeling less like a cage and more like a hearth warmed by unexpected kin. The air carried the faint aroma of reheated coffee and the subtle leather polish from the rider's gear, grounding the moment in the tangible rhythm of lives intersecting. Marcus Iron Reyes settled into a chair that groaned under his weight, his salt and pepper beard framing a rare smile as he shared stories from the road, tales of convoys that had turned back floods for stranded families, of promises kept under starlit skies where the only law was honor. Samuel Ghost Landry unpacked a first aid kit from his saddlebag, checking minor scrapes on Tommy's knee from earlier excitement, his medic's touch gentle and precise, evoking the hospital rooms where bonds like Ethan's with Clara had first forged. Olivia sat beside her mum, the graduation diploma now propped on the coffee table like a cornerstone, its edges no longer trembling in her hands. "I thought we'd lost everything," she whispered, her voice threading through the murmurs. "But you..." You showed up, like family does. Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed over his vest, the coiled serpent emblem rising and falling with his steady breaths. The standoff at the warehouse had been a victory on paper. Kane's signature, a chain, snapped clean, but Ethan's instincts hummed with the residue of unfinished business. The way the enforcer's eyes had lingered, hungry for leverage not yet surrendered. "It's not over till the road smooths out," he said, his scarred jaw tightening as he glanced toward the window, where the horizon stretched endless and unforgiving. Whispers from the crew filtered in, Kane's operation tied to deeper veins, old war profiteers who'd slithered into legitimate fronts, preying on towns like Willow Creek, where desperation bloomed like creosote after rain. Grace nodded, her eyes sharp under the brim of her cap. "We've got feelers out, old contacts from the sands, folks who owe the vow. But if Kane pushes back, it'll test us all." The words settled like dust motes in the slanting light, a reminder that redemption wasn't a single ride, but a convoy enduring storms yet to break. As evening crept in, the sky bruising to deep indigo, the riders shared a makeshift meal, sandwiches from a cooler, passed around with the easy camaraderie of those who'd faced worse hungers. Laughter rippled. Tommy perched on Marcus's knee, regaling them with tales of schoolyard adventures, his voice a bright counterpoint to the day's tension. Olivia watched it unfold, the scene unfolding like frames from a film she'd never scripted, her fractured home mended by strangers' loyalty, the roar of engines evolving into the warmth of shared stories. Yet, beneath the surface, a quiet unease stirred. Sarah's hesitant glances at the door, the way her fingers twisted the locket Ethan had returned, unearthing memories of Clara's final days, when illness had stolen her light but not her faith in second chances. "She wrote to me once after you left," Sarah confessed softly to Ethan, the words spilling like rain on parched ground. "Said you were the brother she always needed. Watch over Livy, and tell her to keep shining." Ethan's nod was solemn, the promise etching deeper, a legacy carried not in blood, but in the unyielding code of chosen bonds. Outside, the convoy's lights flickered on, taillights glowing like embers in the gathering dusk, the faint scent of cooling exhaust mingling with the night's cooling breath. Tyler Spark Novak revved his bike experimentally, the sound a gentle purr that vibrated through the yard, while Samuel packed away his kit with methodical care. The group rose as one, handshakes and hugs exchanged, simple gestures heavy with meaning, sealing the fragile alliance against whatever shadows lingered. Olivia stepped forward, pulling Ethan into a brief embrace, the leather of his vest rough against her cheek. "Thank you," she murmured, the words carrying the weight of her emerging resolve. "For remembering what we forgot." He placed a hand on her shoulder, eyes meeting hers with the steady gaze of a man who'd ridden through hells unnamed. Family doesn't forget, it rides back. As the engines fired up in a cascading symphony, the pack began to roll out, a disciplined wave snaking down the driveway under the emerging stars. Olivia, Sarah, and Tommy waved from the porch, the trailer's porchlight casting a warm halo around them, a beacon against the encroaching night. But as the last taillight crested the rise, a distant engine note intruded. Not the vow's thunder, but a sharper, insidious whine echoing from the direction of the warehouse district. Ethan twisted in his saddle, scanning the rearview, the wind whipping his hair as the convoy pressed on. Kane's grudge simmered, whispers of retaliation brewing in hidden corners. Threats to Olivia's college acceptance, veiled warnings slipped into school files, the kind of poetic injustice that twisted moral fibers. The road ahead curved into uncertainty, demanding sacrifices that peeled back layers of the soul, testing the iron vow's unbreakable chain. In the trailer's quiet wake, Olivia turned inside, the diploma in hand, her heart steady with the echo of engines, a promise that Honor's ride never truly ended, forging light from the darkest horizons. The trailer's screen door creaked shut behind Olivia, sealing the night air outside like a chapter paused mid-sentence. The living room lamp cast a soft amber glow over the cluttered space, illuminating the diploma on the coffee table, its edges now crisp with purpose, no longer a fragile relic of abandonment. Sarah moved to the kitchenette, her hands steadier as she poured water into a kettle, the faint hiss of the burner igniting a small spark of normalcy. Tommy scampered to his room, the serpent patch on his shirt glinting like a badge of newfound courage, his footsteps light against the linoleum that had borne too many heavy silences. Olivia sank onto the couch, the cushions yielding with a familiar sigh. But tonight they felt different, buoyed by the invisible threads of loyalty that had thundered into their lives. The distant whine of that intrusive engine echoed in her mind, a discordant note in the symphony of engines that had saved them, stirring a quiet vigilance she hadn't known she possessed. Across the darkened expanse of Willow Creek, the Iron Vow convoy carved through the winding backroads, taillights weaving like fireflies in the velvet dusk. Ethan led the pack, his Harley humming beneath him, the wind carrying the crisp scent of sagebrush and cooling earth. The locket rested heavy against his chest, Clara's photo a steady pulse, reminding him that promises were the true north on roads that twisted without mercy. Grace rode close, her chopper's sidecar rattling faintly, with the thermos long emptied, her eyes scanning the mirrors for shadows that refused to fade. "That whine! Kane's boys, circling like coyotes," she called over the rev, her voice cutting through the rush of air. Marcus flanked the rear, his broad silhouette a sentinel against the night, while Samuel and Tyler kept pace, their bikes a rhythmic counterpoint to the tension coiling in the group. The warehouse deal had bought time, but grudges like Kane's festered, roots delving into corruption's underbelly. Veiled threats to Olivia's college dreams, whispers planted in administrative files that could unravel her path before it began. Ethan's phone vibrated against his thigh, the buzz insistent as a warning flare. He pulled over at a deserted overlook, the convoy halting in a loose semicircle, engines idling to a low growl that vibrated the gravel. The call was from an old contact, a desk jockey in the Veterans Network with ears in unlikely places. "Malone, your man's stirring the pot," the voice crackled, laced with urgency. "Kane's pulling strings, tampered records at the school, trying to flag the girl's acceptance as family instability. Sloppy, but it'll stick if not nipped." Ethan's jaw clenched, the scar pulling tight under the moonlight that silvered the desert floor. This wasn't just debt, it was poetic cruelty, twisting moral leverage against the innocent to punish the guilty. "We move quiet," he said, ending the call with a nod to the crew. Grace's eyes met his, fierce understanding passing between them. No guns, no spectacle, just the unyielding force of truth wielded like a blade honed by honor. By midnight, the vow had infiltrated the shadows of Willow Creek's undercurrents, not with thunder, but with precision. Samuel Ghost Landry, drawing on his medic's network of quiet allies, slipped into the school's dimly lit admin building under cover of a fabricated maintenance call, his footsteps silent on the tiled halls that smelled of polished wood and stale coffee. The records room was a vault of filing cabinets, moonlight filtering through blinds like bars on forgotten secrets. He worked swiftly, gloved hands sifting through folders until Olivia's file surfaced, its pages marred by fresh annotations. Kane's influence scrawled in bureaucratic ink. With a portable scanner and a few key erasures, he restored the truth, the air humming with the ethical thrill of justice, reclaimed without a trace. Tyler "Spark" Novak stood watch outside, his young frame tense against the chain-link fence, heart pounding with the fire of purpose that the vow had ignited in him. Marcus coordinated from a nearby diner, phone pressed to his ear, leveraging old war ties to pressure Kane's fringes. Subtle calls to regulators hinting at audits, the kind that exposed cracks without a single shot fired. Dawn broke over the trailer park in a wash of rose and gold, the first light gilding the saguaros like sentinels of renewal. Olivia stirred from a fitful sleep, drawn to the window by the familiar rumble approaching. Not a threat, but a balm. The convoy returned, diminished in number but unbroken, engines purring to silence as Ethan dismounted, dust clinging to his boots like badges of the night's vigil. Sarah opened the door before he could knock, her face etched with the remnants of worry, the kettle's steam curling behind her like exhaled fears. Tommy bounded out, patch shining, while Olivia joined them on the porch, the morning air crisp with the promise of dew-kissed earth. "It's handled," Ethan said simply, his voice carrying the weight of miles covered in the dark. He explained in measured tones, the tampered files cleansed. Kane's web clipped at the edges, a final warning delivered through channels that left no room for retaliation. Grace handed Sarah a folder of her own, scholarship extensions from the Veterans Fund, bridges built over the chasms of debt. Sarah's shoulders sagged, relief flooding her features as she clutched the papers, the rift with Clara's memory mending in the warmth of gratitude. You didn't have to, but you did. For her. For us. Ethan shook his head, the locket glinting as he removed it, placing it in Olivia's palm. "Clara's light, it's yours now. Keep it burning." Olivia's fingers closed around it, the metal warm from his pocket, tears blurring the horizon where the convoy would soon depart. Tommy hugged Grace's leg, then ran to Marcus, the big rider lifting him high with a laugh that rumbled like distant thunder. In that tableau, the chosen family crystallized, not forged in birthrights, but in the quiet sacrifices of honor, the loyalty that rode through storms to deliver redemption. Olivia's path to college lay open, unshadowed, a testament to promises that outlasted neglect and corruption's grasp. As the sun climbed, casting long rays across the yard, the iron vow mounted up one last time, engines firing in a farewell chorus that vibrated through the ground like a heartbeat shared. Olivia waved, diploma in one hand, locket in the other, her heart swelling with the knowledge that abandonment's echo had faded, replaced by the unbreakable roar of bonds chosen freely. Ethan led the pack away, the road curving toward new horizons. But the vow endured, a legacy of moral fire where justice whispered louder than any grudge, and family was the ride that never ended. Thank you for riding along on this journey of promises kept and families forged. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more tales of honor and redemption. We'd love to have you in the convoy.